What's going on, everybody? So, this week we're going to go over a few of the hot topics. Not Reddit this time. I'm going to go probably check out Facebook and see some of these kind of reoccurring topics and address them. But first, kind of wanted to just make a quick statement. So, I would like to make it pretty clear that this channel isn't about attacking individuals. I'm not trying to attack just an individual, just debate ideas. And, I think that ideas should be something that we can, talk about, and they should be something that should be always on the table. So, what I'm going to do is just try my best to just move away from any showing of anybody's names. And, I just want to strictly show the ideas, discuss them, agree or disagree or whatever, and then maybe give some reasons on that. And that's really what I want to do or where I want to go for the direction of the podcast, especially when talking about, just political stuff, religious stuff, philosophy, and that type of thing. So, to get started, I wanted to start with a post that I made, and I would like to spark some discussion on this. There was a little bit of discussion, which we'll get into here in a second, but there's a lot that's been going on, and this isn't like I'm not a historian. I'm just a layperson going out, looking and seeing what's happening in our society right now, especially like America in particular. There's a lot of stuff going on around the world, to be sure, but in America, there's been a lot of really weird stuff that's been happening, especially over the past 2 years. And, of course, that can be linked to 4.5, even upwards of 8-10 years, and, even further behind that. But the real concern was in the last 4 years. So I'm going to read from one of my posts here. Saddle up. This is going to be a long one. It's a fact that there's been a steady uptick of white supremacy over the past 20 years. It has been unchecked for so long that it has infiltrated our very institutions. This steady rise has, in turn, caused those that are against white supremacy and fascism to protest. The media and government are hyper-focused on and politicize those that are protesting the actual problem that exists. In turn, because it is politicized, white supremacist groups incite violence at these protests so that it is further politicized in the advantage of the actual problem at hand. And there's quite a few videos on this. On top of that, the Democrats have downplayed those riots due to their poorly founded notions that riots regarding racist police institutions and fascism, for example, are somehow okay. On top of that still, Jeff Sessions, Donald Trump, and many of the higher-end Republicans continued to fan the fire by lying to everyone about the nature of Antifa, the Boogaloo Boys, and the Proud Boys, effectively giving more fuel to the flame by creating an emotional bond between republicanism and white supremacy. People who are Republican but also don't do really any form of research group together in their echo chambers created by social media algorithms to further radicalize people by giving them more extremes of their interests and never suggesting those things that are counter to their preconceived beliefs. QAnon emerges. A pandemic happens. The stage has been set. Donald Trump loses the election. An individual who has collectively lied or misled 30,000 times told yet another lie, that the election was stolen. January 6, Donald Trump, Melania Trump, Donald Trump Jr., Eric Trump, Ted Cruz, and Rudy Giuliani, among others, should have added, incited a riot to storm the Capitol after having lied for over a month about the election results. It was led by the Boogaloo Boys, the Proud Boys, among other white supremacist/fascist groups. If you sit within your echo chamber, you likely don't know some of this. It may be a surprise, but it's what's happening. Unless we quit with this tribalistic banter about this party or that, we aren't going to get our country back. Politics isn't like sports. You should arrive to your own notions and values, not let them be dictated by others. If you allow the opinions of others to be your values without doing the necessary work to arrive to the same conclusion yourself, given all the information, then those people are in an advantage while you are in a disadvantage. Let me switch over here. Donald Trump and GOP Republicans use common Republican values to their political advantage. They don't necessarily agree with those values, and they likely don't. But they will use those same emotional ties to manipulate people to their own ends. Those ends are clearly not in the interest of those who voted to put them there who voted to put them there in office. Using a people as a means to an end rather than pushing effective public policy is a bipartisan issue, but I see it far more on the Republican slate across the board. The common Republican voter isn't bad for the most part. These people have been manipulated their whole lives in some cases. But who answers for these crimes? For now, nobody, I guess. I don't think we're going to fare well on the next pendulum swing unless the problem of white supremacy and terrorism is firmly addressed. All of this is going to get worse as technology removes jobs, yet nobody's talking about that. Wouldn't it be nice to pay for a government that looks to the future for problems rather than reacting to them as they arise? Geez, what a pipe dream, huh? So, it's a really strange phenomena that I'm seeing very commonly, that people will believe things without really vetting that information. So like, for me to go over and say just outright believe something on NPR, for example, without ever having fact checked or, anything on NPR, I'm taking a pretty big risk there. I really think that it should be a person's policy that if you get the majority of your news from a source, to at least at a minimum check that source. And if there's other news or media that you get your information from, now if it's just fiction or obviously we don't even have to deal with that, but if it's you're looking for factual information, right? You're searching for something and you want it to be true. Not that it completes your your bias or something like that, but you're wanting to find true information, not just something that somebody said that may or may not be true. You want somebody that's verified. In today's day and age, you pretty much have to do that. There's not, it's getting better, but it's not something that's going to be just provided to you. You can't take people's word on it either. So it's not like a case, well, I'm just stuck within my bubble of not knowing, so that's just the way it'll be. That's also really not that great. So really, you need to be very careful. But moving on here. So, few comments. And like I said, I'm going to be blacking out all the names, and I want to make sure that this is not seen as attacking a specific individual. This is my post, and some of the other posts that I'll talk about today were also my posts. But in this one I'll show my comments. But I want it to just be like the war of ideas, as close as I can give it. So somebody said, yes, kill the straw man. This is full of logical fallacies, for one. For two, the actual white identitarians, nobody likes them. And I can agree with that. Except for the way that it's fed to these people. They're not, giving the layman Mein Kampf and saying, here's what you need to believe, and then they just take it. It's packaged in a way that's pretty sure is called dog whistling. Like it's packaged in a way that doesn't outright just say, hey guys, we're fascists. Hey, that's not the way that it's happening. Camera went out of focus for some reason. But that's not the way that it's happening. It's not somebody just saying, hey, we're fascists, join us. It's other ways that aren't super apparent to somebody that hasn't been trained to look out for fascism, like, members of Europe or people that live in Europe would be. So this is a little bit different. Let me see if I can fix this camera situation here. Seems to be a little bit better. All right. So I said, and then they were saying, ice cream fallacy, correlation doesn't imply causation, which that one's actually fair. In the main post, I didn't provide a whole lot of evidence there, but I said, what straw man? I stated a sequence of events. You may have something to say about correlation does not equal causation, and I can give you that. This is just my opinion after watching the spiral get faster. It's super weird that Trump is unable to condemn white supremacy or any of those groups. Stand by and stand down is an order you give to your troops, not a fascist group that you're trying to, say that you don't like or something. At the very minimum. But so then they were just saying, it's the ice cream fallacy, and really it's not. Evidence does imply causation along with correlation. So like evidence plus correlation can supply or can make causation. And, there's various links here. I can leave a link to the post. I'm not going to go through these in this episode, but if you're curious, you can look through these, Oath Keepers inciting violence. So the Oath Keepers were contacted by, Republican representatives, and they were brought into this whole thing. And then they're essentially given orders or like dog whistles to think that they're being given coded messages, essentially, to continue on with what they're doing. And I'm just going to say, it's not great. Republican lawmaker inciting violence. That was the guy at the Trump rally right before they marched down to the Capitol building. So then Republican lawmaker lying about election. I believe that was Hawley or Marjorie Taylor Greene, one or the other. Yeah. Republican lawmaker sharing conspiracy theories. Marjorie Taylor Greene. And then there was this other Republican that was giving tours of the building before the attack, even though it had been closed due to the pandemic for many months. Propaganda out of control. Pennsylvania, there was not a smooth transition of power between the incoming and outgoing governor, citing that the election was stolen, essentially. And then there's plenty of information on white supremacist groups through an informant that infiltrated them. So another little interesting thing there. But at the end here, I just said, so I'm clear, those aren't the only articles and videos. There's not really enough time in the day to share them all, and you don't have enough time to read them all either. At the end of the day, if you aren't convinced by what's been happening, you seem like an okay guy. I guess I didn't convince you well. And sometimes you just kind of have to leave it at that, because ultimately we're not if they're not willing to accept the information that you give and you're giving good information, the conversation's kind of over there. I mean, if they want more information, I'd be glad to direct them, but they didn't comment after that. So they might have been convinced, they might not, but that's not my issue. Just state what the facts are as far as I know, and if they accept it, they accept it. If they don't, they don't. So that's all of that. Moving on. Here's one that everybody's going to like. To all the people complaining about gas prices going up and blaming Biden, that's the friggin' point. Go buy a hybrid or electric. Don't want to? Okay. Pay $5 to $8 a gallon. I drive a Prius, cried me a river. Bought that car about 4.5 years ago, when our leaders were telling us that we should transition away from fossil fuels due to the climate crisis. I'm sorry, but you've had 6 years or more. Really, it's been longer than that. When did Gore give his speech, his famous speech? And then, even more information, a significant amount, I want to say in 2008 or something like that, came out. It was quite a bit. But ultimately, this stuff, it's no excuse. There's really no excuse at this point for anybody to be complaining about, they have to spend a bunch of money on fuel or whatever. Look, guys, you've had all kinds of time, and we've also had this political agenda that's been pushing back on this, mainly from a specific party. And I don't want to, sound like a broken record, but it's the same party that is just generally wrong about all of these things. And, I mean, you can't make this shit up. But, so then we have some comments here. And the people don't realize that the price of oil going up helps the oil industry people. They have jobs. I guess so. They won't have jobs in the long run, though. Electric cars destroy the earth too, says somebody. Then a comment to that. Significantly less than gas vehicles, but yes, you're absolutely correct. They do have their own issues. And we'll get into that here in a second. So comment after that says, nobody has made the argument that electric or hybrid cars are completely clean. The data shows that over a vehicle's overall life cycle, which includes manufacturing, use, and disposal, an electric car will generate a fraction of the emissions than that of a hybrid. A hybrid generates a fraction of the emissions of a gas car in most cases. So, nobody has made the argument that electric or hybrid cars are completely clean. The data shows that over a vehicle's overall life cycle, manufacturing, use, and disposal, an electric car will generate a fraction of the emissions of that of a hybrid. A hybrid generates a fraction of the emissions of a gas car in most cases. For example, there's a three-wheel gas car that gets 90 plus miles per gallon. Even with great miles per gallon, that car has far more emissions over the life cycle of an electric. It's a common dishonest argument to state manufacturing a Toyota Yaris gives off less emissions than manufacturing a Prius. The statement is true, but it's not an honest take, since life cycle emissions is a more accurate representation of what matters in terms of climate change. This issue has been politicized because the oil industry is screwed. We saw the exact same behavior when science proved putting lead in gasoline was harmful to people. They covered it up for years until those CEOs were sitting in front of Congress explaining their years of lies. And then they commented, the lithium mines are just as bad as coal and other mineral mines. It destroys thousands of acres of land and natural habitat for animals. Honestly, it is just another form of destruction, only this one can be seen. Okay, that's fair. So then the reply to that, battery technology is ever changing. We won't have to use lithium batteries indefinitely. There are many nanotechnologies that aren't quite to the consumer stage right now, but will be coming in the next few years. Graphene lithium batteries will come first, but they will eventually be replaced by the diamond nuclear voltaic battery, or DNV. Graphene lithium batteries will still use lithium, sure, but they need far less than straight lithium batteries. Eventually, it is projected that graphene will be able to be used just by itself once our advancement in nanotechnology gets further. Graphene comes from carbon, so we could essentially make it via our trash. And then we've got a link to Popular Mechanics, Garbage into Graphene. DNVs have a pretty minimal environmental impact. They can be made from recycled nuclear waste. And there's a few links to that. So, just because there is an environmental impact of hybrids and of electrics doesn't mean that we shouldn't go that route. Okay? That's the main point. The overall emissions for these vehicles is a fraction of a fraction for electric. A fraction of the emissions over the life cycle of a vehicle. And ultimately, people may not believe this stuff, and that's, I suppose, fine, but I'm sure that there's plenty of people believed we didn't have the capability of going to the moon, and now we have vehicles on Mars, and we're planning missions to go to Mars. We have the Chinese that are going to be making habitats on the moon. These are things that sometimes you just have to trust the science and realize when things are being politicized. But I'm not going to beat this one up too long. Let's go ahead and move along. What else do we got? Let's go over into the transgender issue real quick. So a post saying, "A man does not belong in a lady's bathroom, and if this offends anyone, feel free to take yourself off my friends list." Bunch of comments on this one. It says period, and this is not a shot at the gays. Okay. So we got a few comments here. Totally agree, there are only two genders. Exactly, says somebody. What about people born with both gender parts? I believe they are called intersex, so I guess that theory of just two genders is not accurate at all. What about hermaphrodites? They have both parts. What bathroom do they use? And then this weird gif that I don't quite understand. And then says nobody is born with both, which they absolutely are. Replies to that, happens more than you think. Mean to tell me there are people born with both parts? Yes, they're called intersex. I don't need that stuff popping on my phone. I'll take your word for it. Yes, educate yourself. There are also people born one gender, but high hormone levels in another gender, making them androgynous. There's a lot of people are ignorant about when it comes to gender. When it comes to genetics, there's only XX and XY, so two genders still, although the above is still correct. And you had me at XX and XY. This is also why you see an XY person dominating in women's sports, because it's genetically a man. While you can get a sex change, you cannot change the chromosomes of your DNA. So there's some truth about that. And then they said, who cares if you have man parts, you don't belong around females, period, ever. So then we've got a comment here. Regardless of how you feel about people occupying a bathroom, there's a lot of confusion throughout this post. I would have to agree. What everyone in this post is talking about is quote-unquote sex, not quote-unquote gender. Gender, in the most common use of the term, is a social construct. For example, males in society, or American society, typically wear male clothes. This is just a cultural norm that stems from mankind's desire for tradition, so that which goes against tradition is typically seen as taboo. That's why men wearing dresses and high heels is weird to you. It's foreign to the culture you grew up in, and most likely inhabit at this moment. Sex, on the other hand, is a more rigid definition and definitely refers to the sexual organs of the individual in question. In the past, these two terms have been used interchangeably by commoners, but there has been a rigid distinction between these two terms since the 15th century in professional circles, the medical field, and sciences. One last note, did you know that many cultures have unisex bathrooms? Yes, they do. Nothing bad has happened because of it. I mean, I guess people have kind of freaked out. There hasn't been any freak out about it. But, yeah. I mean, I get that it's weird. I get it. But there isn't anything inherently wrong with it. And there's proof in our world today that proves that. So then we have the definition of gender from Merriam-Webster. It says, he or she, I guess, replies back, I'm speechless. I guess uneducated man is as good as blind man. I hate speaking on things I do not know anything about because it makes you look stupid, so I guess I kind of look stupid right now. But I in no way bashing the gays, and as Americans I do believe we are oversensitive and crybabies. I believe we are the softest country in the world. Thanks for opening my eyes, because the last thing I want to do is make a bad judgment call. That's fair. The reply back, you're all good, man. Please don't take my comment as any front. I was admittedly right where a lot of people are today in regards to the trans movement. Took some research and reading on my part to come to a better understanding, but I'm no expert by no means. And then somebody else replies, don't be speechless because people copying and pasting things to make themselves look educated only makes them look like a fool. He is copying one side of the argument, and that's the liberal side. There's multiple studies that use different terms to fit certain agendas. If you ignore all the extra and just go back to basic biology, there are two main sexes, XX female and XY male. Now, there are cases that differ from those things, obviously, but they are not the norm. They are abnormalities or mutations. This are the true facts. People need to stop with the but what ifs. Stop trying to make yourself feel better by thinking you're a civil rights activist, because if they realize everyone is ignoring the real women. You hear people saying a transgender male should be able to participate in women's sports, but think about how no one is talking about how it'll affect real women. Does a real woman not matter anymore? Because sure as hell do to me. Lastly, no copy and pasting here. And then the reply after that, what exactly are you blabbering about? I didn't copy and paste anything but a link to a dictionary definition. I am educated, so effing what? A argument is an argument, no education required. Regardless of that, I never mentioned anything about chromosomes. You did. Gender has nothing to do with chromosomes. The term you're thinking of is sex. I did link the definition of gender up there. If you're searching for a definition, then you should actually read it, the entire thing. I mean, I'd link it again, but I don't want you to feel attacked or anything. So, when it comes to this, I think that people really need to realize that you are not somebody that should be speaking on this in a negative fashion. If you just want to be quiet about it, or you just want to say live and let live or something like that, that's perfectly cool, I suppose. But unless you've tried to do any semblance of basic research, it's not worth talking about this. Your outrage is a little absurd, honestly, and I don't really think it's it's valid. I think dead serious, full stop. The outrage about this is straight up invalid. It's stupid as hell. It does not make any sense. You don't know what the term means, is what this comes down to. And we really need to just, educate ourselves on what the situation is rather than getting all emotional on it. And when I say stupid, it doesn't mean that these people are straight up stupid people or something like that in general. They're just doing stupid things. I do stupid things all the time, and I would call myself stupid for doing those stupid things. So, not necessarily attacking an individual person, just try to have some improvement there, guys. If they don't convict him, does that mean he's innocent? And then, no, Piglet, it means they're all guilty. And really, many of them already are. So then, this is in comment of the second impeachment process that we just witnessed. Kind of a joke, honestly, but that's really not surprising. I've known, honestly, from a young age that our justice system is not very good. It's really just not. It works in some cases. Some cases it works really well, but that doesn't mean that it works on everything, and it definitely does not. I don't think that our legislation works very well. I don't think that our Constitution is bulletproof, obviously. But let's get through some of these comments. So somebody comments, like the Democrats that are scared he will run again and win after Biden screws everyone over. Reply to that, when the president is a literal fascist and incited a mob to overturn the election, I say that's a good reason to be concerned with him running again. I don't really feel the need lately to even defend Biden. Sure, he's going to fail in numerous ways, but at least he's not a freaking fascist. So we're way ahead of the game in comparison, LOL. And then a quote from Sinclair Lewis, when fascism comes to America, it will be wrapped in the flag and carrying a cross, which is exactly what it did. Exactly what it did. Comment to that, or reply to that. But what did all Democrats say when the BS racist riots were going on? But do you hear anything of that on the news now? No, it was no more than political propaganda. Now they're trying to impeach a president who isn't even in office to avoid people paying attention to everything else they are doing. It's a magic trick, hey, look here and not there. It's typical BS politics. Tell me why now the Biden is in office, the world is silent to BS riots and Antifa, and all else 30 days ago it was top priority and now is non-existent. So, comment to that. I'm not here to defend the Democrats. Them not saying more about the riots was wrong. Do you happen to know who incited these riots? The police and paramilitary fascist groups. Yet another thing that wasn't shown on primetime but came out later. In a quote. Others have seen evidence of right-wing extremists. J.J. McNabb, a fellow at George Washington University program on extremism, has been monitoring chatter about the protests among anti-government extremists on social media platforms. She has access to dozens of private Facebook groups for followers of the loosely organized Boogaloo movement, which uses an 80s movie sequel as a code word for a second civil war. She also has been poring over images from the weekend protests and spotted some Boogaloo boys in the crowds, carrying high-powered rifles and wearing tactical gear. They want to co-opt them in order to start their war. They see themselves as being on the side of protesters, and that the protesters themselves are useful in causing anarchy, McNabb said. So, does this really seem that weird? We already saw in history police departments causing riots towards black protesters or protesters that are protesting black rights. We have seen it in history. It has literally happened in this country. Hitler, a lot of his worst policies in that country towards the Jews were taken from our Jim Crow laws. The Jim Crow laws of America. Do you think that it benefits a fascist to have riots, cause anarchy? Doesn't that play into their same game? Haven't we seen how they manipulated and made it more difficult on January 6th for those riots to be more difficult to handle? You see where this is going? We don't need every tiny little piece of evidence to prove this stuff. They do it right out in the open, over and over and over again. It's got to stop. It's really got to stop. So, those riots were also incited. Difference is we can't tie it directly to Trump legally, but we know how the cockroach fascist mofos who have been coming out of the woodwork due to Trump and the GOP's rhetoric and social media presence. Trump, the police unions, and the GOP all benefit from anarchy because it's yet another finger they can point at Democrats, even to further their agenda of lining their pockets with our tax dollars. If you take quotes from Pelosi, Waters, and many other Democrats, they too should be impeached for inciting violence with their words. I suppose that there's maybe an argument that they should be held accountable. I don't know if that necessarily means impeachment, because I wouldn't say that they were inciting violence the same way that Trump and his kids were. But, them not saying something is concerning. I think that there's a missed quote there, but let's just go ahead and move on. So it says, here's one way to look at it. Prefer they tweet their personal opinions publicly as to lie about their beliefs and vote the complete opposite when it's time to make decisions. I'd rather hear sad truths, and I'm just going to have to disagree with that. I would just prefer that they have beliefs that are for good reasons if they're in public office and they perform their duties as, a public servant in the ways that are honorable to that office. That's what I wish. It says, at their very worst, Democrats are ineffective, incompetent, or just plain stupid. It says, when it comes to green... Okay, but at least they aren't Marjorie Taylor Greene, a literal fascist and conspiracy theorist. Hey, when it comes to Greene, those people voted her in knowing her stance on things, and that is their right to vote in whomever they choose to represent them. And because she was elected by our constituents, it is not right for her to be removed from committees where she is unable to do the job she was elected to do. And then reply to that. Maybe if they have strong opinions on cuisine or movies or music or sports. Even if they have different political ideals, that's okay. But being a fascist, though, that's not okay. At that point, it's not just a difference of opinion. And then it's, do I agree with her? No, but her constituents do, and she should be allowed to represent their views regardless. And then reply to that, she's sworn an oath to protect the Constitution, and she helped incite a riot. She lost her place at the table. Her constituents can vote for a different person. There's plenty to choose from that will be better than her. I'd love for it if we had a political party that was progressive and effective, but we don't. Dislike Democrats and Republicans, but for different reasons entirely. Well, I would prefer we put term limits on Congress, just like we do presidents, and we would weed out a whole lot of corporate kiss asses and somehow multimillionaire representatives when they had nothing of the sort when elected. And then somebody replied, do you really just say constituents should be allowed to vote in a fascist? They replied back, doubling down, there is a reason we vote. If that is who a certain set of people choose to vote into office, then that is their choice. Ignorant people will never learn. That is the glory of democracy. We make our own bed, and damn it, if only people would learn from their mistakes. Then it says, didn't see this the other day. Our system cannot allow fascists to be elected. By definition, fascists do not support and will not defend the Constitution. They cannot possibly be a U.S. representative then, since that is the oath you must swear before going into office. If they swear that oath and then break it, they are a traitor to the country. There are far too many protections for elected officials to buck the law, so we must be extremely careful with people like this. I would agree with that. I would have to say, okay, this is that person that was talking about the fact. Did you really say that? I have to say that's the opposite of democracy, the opposite of constitution. There's no glory in electing fascists. Those mistakes are written in blood, and people have not learned from them. A few other comments. Fascists, lol. We need to burn their books and re-educate their children. Root out these Trump rats, lol. Comment to that. I wouldn't go that far. You can't counter fascism with fascism. Somebody commented spot on. So, big takeaway here. A fascist can't possibly, and whether it's right leaning or left leaning fascist, doesn't matter. You know, the authoritarian will not support and defend the Constitution. By definition of being a fascist and an authoritarian, you can't possibly do that. So we can't elect people. We can't put people in office that essentially are lying about their oath. That's the whole point. That's the point of doing the oath. So this one was a little easy, but I'm just going to have to say, I mean, a lot of people are kind of, confused about this stuff. They don't quite understand the ramifications of continuing to elect bad people into the government. I mean, they kind of understand it, but what they don't understand is that how easy it is to lose control. Once there's enough of those people in there, and they all have similar views of overthrowing the government and instilling their own fascist regime, it's hard to come back. Many people will die to be able to get it back at that point. So it's in our best interest to just not even let them in office. But that brings me to the end of the conversation today. Went through some various subjects on Facebook and kind of talked about some very pressing ideas in today. But ultimately, I think that we're going to get past this. It's going to be slow to educate people, especially since there's been a lot of lies. I still do worry about the pendulum swing in 2 years, and also especially in 4 years. But I think overall it's something that we can tackle. We just got to work on it. So if this is content that you like, please hit that like button on Facebook, share on Facebook, hit the subscribe button on YouTube. And as always, thanks for watching.